Judge mocks Karoline Leavitt over tariffs, stunned when she learns she's a legal genius. Now picture this. Karoline Leavitt's stomach churned. It felt like a restless sea, sloshing with anxiety and a disconcerting hint of breakfast burritos. The courthouse loomed before her, a gray behemoth of granite and shadowed intentions. Sunlight glared off the polished brass handles of the main doors, momentarily blinding her as she hurried inside. The air inside was thick with the scent of old paper, lemon-scented cleaning fluid, and the hushed anticipation of 1,000 legal battles past. Karoline clutched her briefcase tighter, its worn leather a small comfort against her trembling fingers. She could feel the eyes of seasoned lawyers, paralegals, and court clerks boring into her as she navigated the labyrinthine hallways. Each glance seemed to whisper doubts, amplifying the chorus of insecurities already playing in her head. "Leavitt, Karoline?" A brusque voice cut through her internal monologue. A woman with severely styled gray hair and a name tag that read, "Ms. Henderson, court liaison," stood impatiently before her. Karoline stammered, "Yes, that's me." Ms. Henderson raised a skeptical eyebrow. "Courtroom 3. Judge Thompson is already seated. Don't be late again." The courtroom was a study in mahogany and muted gold. The gallery was sparsely populated, mostly with reporters and a handful of bored-looking spectators. At the front, elevated on a dais, sat Judge Theodore Thompson. His gaze, sharp and unwavering, swept over the room like a hawk searching for prey. His face, etched with years of legal battles and personal disappointments, was a mask of formidable authority. He adjusted his spectacles, the gesture somehow radiating disapproval. Karoline took her place at the plaintiff's table, her hands clammy as she arranged her notes. Her opposing counsel, a man named Mr. Abernathy, offered her a condescending smile. He was a partner at a prestigious firm, all tailored suit and practiced charm. Karoline had researched him extensively. He was known for his ruthless efficiency and his penchant for belittling junior lawyers. Judge Thompson cleared his throat, the sound echoing through the silent courtroom. "Leavitt versus Global Trade Dynamics. Ms. Leavitt, are you ready to proceed?" Karoline swallowed, her throat suddenly dry. "Yes, Your Honor." "Then let us begin." Judge Thompson's voice was a low rumble, laced with impatience. "I trust you're aware of the gravity of this case, Ms. Leavitt. We're not discussing playground squabbles here. This is a multimillion-dollar trade dispute with potentially significant ramifications." Karoline nodded, her heart hammering against her ribs. She rose to her feet, her legs feeling strangely unsteady. She cleared her throat again. "Your Honor, esteemed members of the court, I stand before you today to represent the interests of—" She stumbled, the carefully rehearsed words momentarily deserting her. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to meet Judge Thompson's unwavering gaze. "Your Honor, I represent the small businesses of this nation, businesses that are being strangled by the suffocating grip of unfairly imposed tariffs. We are here to demonstrate the detrimental effects of these tariffs, how they stifle innovation, destroy jobs, and ultimately, undermine the very fabric of our economy." Karoline found her rhythm, her voice gaining strength and conviction. She spoke of shuttered factories, of families struggling to make ends meet, of the slow, agonizing death of the American dream. She argued that the tariffs, presented as a protective measure, were in reality a weapon wielded against the vulnerable, enriching a select few at the expense of the many. Abernathy shifted in his seat, a flicker of unease crossing his face. Judge Thompson, however, remained impassive, his expression unreadable. Karoline concluded her opening statement, her voice ringing with passionate defiance. "We are confident that the evidence presented will demonstrate beyond a reasonable doubt that these tariffs are unjust, unsustainable, and ultimately unlawful. We ask the court to consider the human cost of these policies and to render a judgment that will restore fairness and opportunity to all." She sat down, her knees weak, her heart still racing. A beat of silence hung in the air, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the courtroom clock. Then, Judge Thompson spoke, his voice cold and dismissive. "Ms. Leavitt, an impassioned plea, to be sure. But passion alone does not win cases. I trust your evidence is as compelling as your rhetoric. He leaned back in his chair, a hint of a smirk playing on his lips. Let the games begin. He raised his gavel. The gavel fell beneath the surface. Your Honor, Karoline began, a slight tremor betraying her nerves. We contend that the duties imposed on these enterprises are misguided? Judge Thompson cut in, a sardonic smile twisting his lips. He settled deeper into his oversized chair, embodying judicial superiority. Perhaps even idealistic? Ms. Leavitt, are you truly suggesting these small businesses, as you so affectionately dub them, are casualties of a system engineered for broader economic prosperity? A warmth bloomed on Karoline's face. She'd braced herself for opposition, but not such outright rejection. She drew herself up straighter. With respect, Your Honor, our analysis reveals a disproportionate burden on these businesses, impeding their expansion and their competitive edge. A low chuckle, like distant thunder, rumbled from the bench. Analysis, you say? Did this analysis involve finger paints and construction paper? Because it strikes me as lacking a fundamental grasp of global commerce. A rustle of whispers stirred in the gallery. Karoline felt the weight of their attention, a mix of curiosity, pity, and thinly veiled judgment. She inhaled deeply, focusing on her notes. We commissioned a comprehensive econometric study, Your Honor, accounting for import elasticity, consumer behavior, and supply-side price sensitivity. The findings unequivocally demonstrate a detrimental effect on the profitability of these firms. Econometric, is it? Thompson arched a brow, his tone laced with mockery. And did this same study forecast the exact moment a butterfly sneezes in Shanghai and sets off a tsunami in Santa Monica? Ms. Leavitt, reality is far messier than your equations allow. These duties are a necessary evil, a means to a desired outcome. Surely a lawyer of your acumen appreciates that. Karoline's jaw tightened. He wasn't listening, he was performing. He was relishing her discomfiture. But she wouldn't falter. She refused to give him the satisfaction. Your Honor, she stated, her voice firm despite the tremors in her hands. The broader economic prosperity you champion shouldn't be built on the backs of the very enterprises that form our economic foundation. These tariffs aren't mere figures on a ledger. They represent flesh and blood people, livelihoods, dreams that are being put at risk. Pure sentimentality, Ms. Leavitt. Judge Thompson scoffed, waving a dismissive hand. I've heard it all before. Unless you have something of substance to present, something beyond your rose-colored view of the marketplace, I suggest we proceed. Karoline's pulse hammered in her ears. She caught Mr. Abernathy's eye at the back of the room. He offered a subtle, encouraging nod. She had to break through. She had to make him understand. Your Honor, she began once more, forcing a semblance of composure. Beneath the apparent triviality of these tariffs lies a web of interwoven consequences. Small businesses are compelled to inflate prices, triggering a decline in sales, layoffs, and ultimately business failures. This creates a cascading effect, impacting not only the entrepreneurs themselves but their workers, their families, and their local communities. It's an insidious decay, Your Honor, a silent chipping away at the promise of prosperity. A prodigy's past. The courtroom's fluorescent hum amplified Karoline's mounting unease. Judge Thompson recited legal history, yet only her heart's frantic drumbeat filled Karoline's ears. She adjusted her spectacles, their familiar pressure a small, grounding force against the roiling nervousness. This case, seemingly a minor squabble over imported fabrics, held the fate of the small enterprises she championed. Failure was not an option. A sudden memory, a world away from the sterile room, little Karoline, age 6, perched precariously on a stool in her mother's humble diner, encircled by teetering stacks of library treasures. The savory tang of frying bacon mingled with the musty perfume of aging paper and ink. While other children played outside, Karoline absorbed entire encyclopedias, her young mind a thirsty sponge. She would relentlessly quiz the truckers who frequented the diner, peppering them with questions about the origin of their cargo, the complexities of tariffs, and the intricacies of global trade. They'd respond with indulgent chuckles, always obliging her precocious inquiries. Her mother, etched with the lines of unwavering toil, recognized the exceptional spark within her daughter. Sacrificing everything, she'd diligently save, investing in books and nurturing Karoline's aspirations. "You possess an inner flame, Karoline," she'd declare, her tone firm yet laced with tenderness. "Never let anyone extinguish it." The memory evaporated, yielding to the stark reality of the present. Judge Thompson's gaze bore into her, awaiting her response. Karoline inhaled deeply, wrestling down the wave of rising anxiety. Then, another recollection surfaced, this one vivid and bracing, the arrival of the Yale acceptance letter. The full scholarship. A surge of pure, unadulterated elation coursed through her, so intense it welled tears in her mother's eyes. It validated years of unyielding dedication, of countless nights spent immersed in textbooks while the world slumbered. A swift montage played in her mind, bleary-eyed evenings in the law library, powered by stale coffee and sheer grit. The thrill of decoding complex legal frameworks, the fulfillment of dissecting intricate trade agreements. The announcement echoing as she received the Distinguished Parker Prize for International Law. The publication of her seminal article on the effect of tariffs on small businesses, lauded by scholars as groundbreaking. Graduating summa cum laude, the diploma, despite its weight, feeling feather-light compared to the years of labor it symbolized. She pictured Professor Davies, her mentor, a luminary in international trade law. He'd recognized her potential, cultivated her talent, and urged her towards excellence. "You have an extraordinary gift, Karoline," he'd observed. "The unique capacity to discern the human implications concealed behind the legal jargon. Never dismiss that." Back in the stifling courtroom, Judge Thompson's gavel rapped with impatience. Karoline drew herself up, the memories fortifying her determination. The flame her mother had ignited, the fire Professor Davies had fanned, now blazed within her. This transcended legal precedent and trade agreements. It was about the livelihoods of her clients, the families sustained by those small enterprises. She met Judge Thompson's eyes, her voice resonating with newfound clarity and conviction. "Your Honor," she began. "With the utmost respect I submit." The hidden clause. Dust motes danced in the single shaft of afternoon sun piercing the gloom of the county archive. Karoline coughed, the musty air scratching at her throat. Days she had spent here, hunched over brittle parchments, the smell of decaying paper clinging to her like a shroud. Each document, a desperate gamble. Each hour, a prayer that she was on the right track. She ran a trembling hand through her already disheveled bun, stray strands tickling her nose. Outside, the city was alive with the sounds of commerce, the very sounds threatened by the punitive tariffs she was fighting. Her clients, the small businesses teetering on the brink of collapse, their futures resting on her ability to pull a rabbit from a hat, or in this case, an obscure clause from a forgotten treaty. Another scroll. Another disappointment. Her eyes, gritty and burning, scanned the archaic script. Her legal team, God love them, had called her crazy. Insane even, to think she could find something buried so deep. But something in the pit of her stomach, a stubborn ember of hope, refused to let her quit. She almost missed it. A phrase, tucked away in the dense legalese of a 1788 trade agreement between the fledgling United States and a consortium of European merchants. Provided always that levies exceeding 10% ad valorem shall be deemed null and void should the signatory nations fail to convene a council of trade within a period not exceeding 5 years. Her breath hitched. The air in the archive suddenly felt thin, electrified. She reread the clause, her heart hammering against her ribs. It was there. Clear as day. A hidden clause, a forgotten proviso, a lifeline thrown across centuries. Karoline scrambled for her phone, her fingers clumsy with adrenaline. "Ben? I found something. Something big." Her voice cracked. "The 1788 treaty, there's a clause about a trade council and tariff limits." Later that evening, the small conference room at Leavitt and Klein buzzed with nervous energy. Ben Klein, his brow furrowed, leaned forward. "So you're saying, if we can prove that no formal trade council has convened within the stipulated 5-year periods, these tariffs are technically illegal?" Karoline nodded, spreading copies of the treaty across the table. Exactly. It's a long shot. We have to prove it through 200 years of patchy records. But it's a shot. It's the only shot we have. Lisa, their paralegal, ever the pragmatist, raised her hand. And the government's lawyers? They'll have seen this. They'll be prepared. Maybe, Karoline conceded. Or maybe they've dismissed it as irrelevant, too old, too obscure. Maybe they're relying on the assumption that nobody would dig this deep. A tense silence hung in the air. The fate of their clients, the livelihoods of countless families, balanced on the razor's edge of a centuries-old loophole. Okay, Ben said, finally breaking the silence. Let's dig. Lisa, I need you to find every record, every mention, every whisper of a trade council from 1788 onward. Karoline, you focus on building our legal argument. We need to prove this clause is still applicable, that it hasn't been superseded by later agreements. Karoline straightened her shoulders, the exhaustion momentarily forgotten. The weight on her chest hadn't lifted, but it felt different now, infused with a flicker of hope. Let's show them what happens when they underestimate a small firm with a big idea. Prove it. Ms. Leavitt. Judge Thompson's voice boomed, the courtroom amplifying each syllable, shattering the palpable tension. His gaze, a laser focus, held Karoline captive. You've levied some striking accusations. Collusion, deceptive trade practices. These are grave charges, demanding substantiation beyond impassioned pleas. He tented his fingers, his expression an inscrutable mask. Convince me. The room swam. Nausea churned within Karoline. Across the aisle, Marcus Sterling permitted himself a thin, triumphant smile, the kind a wolf might wear, cornering its prey. He settled back, radiating an air of unearned invincibility. Taking a steadying breath, Karoline grounded herself. This was the crux. Her fingers, betraying her composure, trembled as she retrieved a manila folder from her briefcase. She felt the heat of Sterling's stare, a deliberate attempt to unnerve her, but she stared straight ahead. Your Honor, she began, her voice far more steady than she felt. That is precisely what I intend to do. What I present now constitutes undeniable proof of the defendant's deliberate manipulation of import tariffs, orchestrated to devastate my clients' livelihoods. She placed the first exhibit, a chain of emails unearthed through arduous discovery, on the table. These exchanges, she stated, between Mr. Harding, Sterling Industries CEO, and key figures within the Department of Commerce, detail strategies to artificially inflate tariffs on goods vital to my clients, employing fabricated data and intentionally misleading rationales. Sterling offered a dry, dismissive chuckle. Objection, Your Honor. Speculation. These emails, devoid of context, prove nothing. Context will be furnished, Mr. Sterling. Judge Thompson rumbled, his tone brooking no argument. Ms. Leavitt, proceed without delay. Karoline offered a quick nod of gratitude. Next, she revealed a comprehensive spreadsheet analyzing import data from the past half-decade. This document, she declared, indicating specific columns, illustrates a distinct and statistically significant surge in tariff rates applied to my clients' imports, disproportionate to those levied on comparable goods brought in by rival companies. No legitimate economic rationale supports this disparity. Sterling shifted, the smirk now wavering at the edges. He opened his mouth to protest, but Karoline preempted him. Furthermore, Your Honor, she pressed, her voice gaining strength with each word, I submit sworn affidavits from former Sterling Industries employees, attesting under oath that they received explicit directives to fabricate data and rig market reports in order to justify these exorbitant tariffs. She laid the affidavits on the table. The weight of their allegations hung heavy in the air. Color leached from Sterling's face, replaced by genuine apprehension. He leaned in, pupils narrowed, pinning Karoline with a look of pure venom. You think this is some kind of game, Ms. Leavitt? He spat, his voice a bare thread. You're playing with forces you can't possibly comprehend. You have no idea who you're dealing with. Karoline met his gaze, her own unwavering and resolute. I know exactly who I'm dealing with, Mr. Sterling, she countered, her voice ringing with conviction. "And I assure you, I'm not intimidated." Turning the tide. The courtroom air hung thick and heavy, almost a tangible weight on Karoline's tongue. From his high seat, Judge Thompson, a man whose expression suggested a perpetual disappointment in humanity, observed her. Across the aisle, Marcus Sterling's smirk, while present, seemed to have lost some of its initial bravado amidst his assembled council. "Ms. Leavitt," Judge Thompson's voice resonated, a deep boom that vibrated the very floorboards. "Are you alleging deliberate misrepresentation on the part of the government?" Karoline drew herself up, the culmination of her meticulous preparation lending her strength. "I submit, Your Honor, that a vital piece of evidence has been overlooked. Article 7, Section 3, Paragraph B of the original trade accord, ratified in '88. A stipulation, I contend, that stands in direct opposition to the rationale given for these tariffs." A wave of hushed whispers swept through the spectators. Sterling's smile evaporated. He hunched forward, urgently conferring with his chief lawyer. At Karoline's gesture, her assistant brought the relevant section of the document into sharp relief on the screen behind the bench. The legal jargon was dense, but Karoline had long since navigated its intricacies. "As you can see, Your Honor," she continued, her voice resonating with certainty, "this clause expressly prohibits levies on goods produced using sustainable methods, provided those methods adhere to specified environmental benchmarks. Benchmarks I emphasize that my client's company has scrupulously met for over a decade." The color drained from Sterling's face, replaced by a barely suppressed rage. He slammed a fist against the table, earning a sharp reprimand from Judge Thompson. "Mr. Sterling, control yourself, please." Karoline forged ahead. "Furthermore, we argue that the government possessed full knowledge of this caveat. Internal memoranda, submitted as evidence earlier this week, unequivocally show that the Department of Trade was alerted to this potential conflict well in advance of enacting these tariffs." She paused, allowing her words to resonate. Then, she introduced Dr. Anya Sharma, an internationally acclaimed expert on international trade regulations. Dr. Sharma, radiating quiet confidence, took the stand and was sworn in. "Dr. Sharma," Karoline began, "could you elucidate the significance of this previously disregarded clause for the court?" Dr. Sharma adjusted her spectacles, her voice precise and measured. "Article 7, Section 3, Paragraph B embodies a progressive commitment to environmentally conscious trade practices. Its purpose was to encourage sustainable production and discourage practices detrimental to the environment. Imposing tariffs on companies complying with these standards not only breaches the accord but actively undermines its core objective." She elaborated on the complex legal landscape surrounding similar stipulations, referencing specific international rulings and trade agreements. The gallery listened with rapt attention, and even Judge Thompson appeared genuinely engaged. Karoline cast a glance at Sterling. His complexion was ashen, beads of perspiration dotting his brow. His legal team furiously scribbled notes, their expressions grave. "Dr. Sharma," Karoline asked, bringing her examination to a close, "in your professional judgment, does the imposition of these tariffs constitute a violation of the original trade agreement?" "Without question, yes," Dr. Sharma declared. "It is a definitive and unambiguous violation." A tidal wave of sound crashed through the chamber. Gasps, murmurs, and disbelieving whispers filled the air. Karoline felt the atmosphere shift, the scales tipping. The arrogant self-assurance that had emanated from Marcus Sterling moments before had vanished, replaced by a tangible anxiety. This transcended simple tariffs. It was a question of deception, dominance, and the very future of equitable trade. Personal attacks. Marcus Sterling's tie suddenly choked, the starched collar of ice around his windpipe. The courtroom's air, once charged with anticipation, now felt leaden, suffocating. He stared at Karoline Leavitt, her features brightened by the projected display of incriminating material. Emails, balance sheets, tapped conversations, a damning mosaic of his offenses, assembled with unnerving skill. Each exhibit sealed another crack in his crumbling defense. His charm had failed, subtle pressures had backfired, even a desperate appeal to sympathy proved futile. Karoline stood firm, her logic unassailable, her poise unshakable. From his high perch, Judge Thompson wore the mask of disinterest, but Marcus could sense the scales tilting decisively against him. A cold dread, like a venomous snake, began to constrict his insides. He needed to seize control of the narrative, to undermine her credibility, to somehow wrest victory from the precipice of defeat. "Ms. Leavitt," he began, his tone dripping with a sugary cordiality that felt alien on his tongue. "While I admire your zeal, one can't help but observe your relative inexperience. Does someone so new truly appreciate the intricacies of international trade, the delicate dance of tariffs and, well, let's just say seasoned expertise counts for something, wouldn't you concede?" Karoline remained unfazed. Her eyes, keen and intelligent, bored into his. "My age is immaterial, Mr. Sterling. The evidence is self-explanatory. I have shown conclusive proof of your calculated manipulation of tariff classifications to avoid legally obligated payments. These aren't subjective interpretations, they're demonstrable realities." He persisted, ignoring the subtle shift in Judge Thompson's posture, a slight clenching of his jaw that signaled displeasure. "Realities? Or the perspective of someone wet behind the ears? Someone without decades navigating the labyrinthine world of global commerce? Perhaps a more mature legal mind would see these realities through a different lens, no?" He dismissed her with a casual flick of his wrist. A ripple of disquiet spread through the room. He could feel the collective discomfort, the sense that he'd overstepped. But he was beyond restraint. He was sinking, and Karoline Leavitt was the weight dragging him under. "Furthermore," he went on, his voice rising, bordering on hysteria, "I question the objectivity of someone so driven by personal conviction. I understand Ms. Leavitt maintains a rather prominent voice on social media concerning these matters. Is this truly about pursuing justice, or about promoting a personal cause?" Karoline inhaled deeply, her composure unwavering. "My personal convictions are irrelevant to the facts before this court. I took an oath to uphold the law, and I am doing just that." Judge Thompson cleared his throat, the sound amplified in the now hushed space. He leaned in, his gaze locked on Marcus. "Mr. Sterling," he said, his voice a low rumble, "we are approaching the realm of personal attacks. Confine your remarks to the evidence, or I will be compelled to cite you for contempt." Marcus's face burned. The game was up. His carefully constructed empire of influence was collapsing, reduced to shards by a woman he had scorned as a novice. The venomous snake of dread tightened its coils. The rebuttal. Karoline stood, the scrape of her chair legs against the polished wood a stark intrusion on the suffocating quiet. Across the room, Marcus resembled a deflated prizefighter, the wind knocked out of his earlier swagger. His team mirrored his dismay, their anxious murmurs evaporated, replaced by a thick cloud of apprehension. Judge Thompson, impassive behind his high perch, observed her, a glint of something akin to curiosity momentarily softening his severe gaze. "Mr. Sterling's presentation was certainly impassioned," Karoline began, her voice ringing with clarity and resolve. "However, its reliance on flamboyant rhetoric and ad hominem attacks overshadowed, I believe, the substantive evidence at hand." A wave of indrawn breaths swept through the courtroom. Meeting Judge Thompson's stare head-on, she continued, "With the court's indulgence, this matter transcends mere personalities. We are here to dissect tariffs, interpret international trade agreements, and demonstrate the quantifiable damage wrought upon American businesses by Mr. Sterling's policies." She indicated the stark figures projected on the screen, undeniable in their implications. "The data paints a clear picture. These tariffs, enacted under Mr. Sterling's guidance, precipitated a marked contraction in exports and an attendant surge in domestic prices. We have furnished invoices, shipping documents, and expert testimony to substantiate these claims. Mr. Sterling, in contrast, has offered, what, precisely? Nebulous assertions and baseless accusations." Karoline paused, allowing her words to resonate. The atmosphere in the room was dense, almost palpable. The low thrum of the ventilation system provided the only counterpoint to the silence, underscored by the soft rustle of documents in the gallery. Mr. Sterling conjures a narrative of a grand conspiracy, a clandestine network arrayed against him. She pressed on, her voice gaining momentum. But where does the proof reside? What factual basis supports these extravagant allegations? There is none. Because, Your Honor, the truth possesses a starker simplicity, and a more damning resonance. Mr. Sterling embarked on a series of poorly considered decisions rooted in faulty reasoning and a cavalier disregard for the resulting fallout. Now, he endeavors to divert culpability by casting aspersions on the motivations and integrity of those who dare to challenge his actions. She advanced slowly towards the bench, the rhythmic tap of her heels punctuating the silence. We are not participants in a smear campaign. We are here to uphold the principles of law, to shield American businesses from the crippling consequences of unchecked authority and imprudent policies. Toward this end, we have presented a compelling argument, buttressed by incontrovertible proof. Mr. Sterling has presented precisely nothing. Karoline halted a few feet from the bench, her gaze locked on Judge Thompson's. This is not about personal animosity or political machinations. This is about fundamental fairness. This is about the pursuit of justice. And justice demands that Mr. Sterling be held accountable for the devastation he has unleashed. A profound silence enveloped the courtroom. Even Marcus appeared speechless, his face a study in stunned disbelief. Karoline held her breath, awaiting Judge Thompson's verdict. The judge steepled his fingers, his expression inscrutable. The heavy silence stretched, punctuated only by the relentless ticking of the clock, each tick echoing like a hammer blow. A judge's humility. The courtroom held its breath. Judge Thompson, perched high on his mahogany throne, adjusted his spectacles and cleared his throat, the sound amplified in the sudden silence. He looked, not at Karoline, but somewhere above her head, towards the faded mural depicting Lady Justice. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, and mindful of the potential impact on the community, this court finds in favor of the plaintiff. A collective gasp rippled through the room. Marcus Thorne, the man whose tariff structure Karoline had so diligently dismantled, sat rigid, his face paling under the harsh fluorescent lights. Karoline, however, felt a quiet satisfaction bloom within her. No outward display, just a deep, resonant understanding that justice, however delayed, had been served. The arguments presented by Ms. Leavitt, Judge Thompson continued, his voice booming now, regarding the discriminatory nature of the tariff structure, particularly its disproportionate impact on small businesses and its deviation from established trade practices, were compelling. The court finds that the defendant's justification for the tariff lacks sufficient legal basis and is therefore deemed unlawful. A wave of exhilaration washed over the gallery. Whispers erupted, quickly escalating into a celebratory buzz. Karoline's colleagues, previously doubtful, now beamed at her with newfound respect. She allowed herself a small, almost imperceptible smile. News of the victory spread like wildfire. Within hours, Karoline's phone was buzzing incessantly with congratulatory messages. Articles appeared online, hailing her as a champion of the underdog, a legal prodigy dismantling corporate greed. Even her old law school professors, those who had seemed indifferent during her time there, were now eager to claim her as one of their own. The weight of the victory settled on her shoulders, a heavy but welcome burden. It wasn't just about winning the case. It was about proving herself, about challenging the preconceived notions that had dogged her since the beginning. Later that evening, as Karoline was packing up her briefcase, a court officer approached her. Ms. Leavitt, Judge Thompson requests a moment of your time in his chambers. She hesitated. What could the judge possibly want? He had been so distant, so seemingly dismissive throughout the trial. Curiosity, however, won out. Judge Thompson's chambers were surprisingly Spartan, devoid of the ostentatious displays of power she might have expected. He sat behind his desk, the lamp casting long shadows across his face. He looked smaller, somehow, less imposing than he had in the courtroom. Ms. Leavitt, please have a seat. He gestured towards a worn leather chair. Karoline sat, her back straight, her gaze unwavering. The air crackled with unspoken tension. I wanted to apologize, Judge Thompson began, his voice low and uncharacteristically hesitant. For my initial assessment of you, I confess I allowed certain preconceived notions to cloud my judgment. I underestimated you. Karoline remained silent, allowing him to continue. Your legal acumen is remarkable. The way you dissected the tariff structure, the clarity of your arguments, it was truly impressive. He paused, his eyes meeting hers for the first time with genuine sincerity. I've been on the bench for many years, Ms. Leavitt, and I've seen a great many lawyers. You possess a rare talent, a gift. Don't let anyone, including myself, ever make you doubt it. He sighed, a weary sound. It's a judge's duty to be impartial, to weigh the evidence fairly. I strive for that, but I am, like everyone else, susceptible to prejudice. Thank you for reminding me of the importance of looking beyond superficial judgments. He extended his hand, his grip surprisingly firm. Congratulations, Ms. Leavitt. You earned this victory. Karoline shook his hand, a warmth spreading through her. This wasn't just a victory in court. It was a victory over prejudice, over the insidious biases that lingered in the shadows. And in that moment, she understood that true power wasn't just about winning, it was about changing minds.